Amazing. Good morning to you as well. How have you been?
Good, can't complain. Excited to chat with you. See what Stuart's got going on. He called me yesterday.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And
Uh,
and you two have never met before, right? I don't
no,
think.
not at all. He
Yeah.
called me out of the blue, and I was like, "Hello." He's like, "It's Stuart," and I'm like, "Okay, how can I help you?" He's like, "I'm gonna be on the panel tomorrow."
Oh, that's awesome.
So I was
Yeah.
like, "Wow, that is the first. I've never had the other panelists call me, so that was a nice touch on his part."
Yeah, that's amazing. It's always good to sync up. And I mean, this is actually our first time talking as well, to a lot of the people going to be watching this. Like sometimes they think that we put these things together, that there's a coordination going on in effect and stuff like that. And obviously we all know that that is not true in any sense. But I mean, how long you've been in real estate? And I think we maybe touched on that a little bit, but
Yeah,
let's
8 years full time. I started in 2008, 15. And from probably the first month, I've been working rentals. So
amazing.
it's always just been something that I've done in my business. Like to me, it would be weird not to factor that in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, I've had the pleasure of working with some of the smallest agents to some of the biggest teams that have come and gone. And what's interesting is that one of the primary sources of deals down the line is
Mhm.
rentals, and they've really encompassed that into their complete structure of their entire being as a team. In fact, any new agent that joins some of these teams, they don't even start touching buyer leads until they've gone through rental leads, get an understanding how to work renters, and so it's not just being used, from a introductory perspective to help agents understand how to work these things and work these
Mhm.
deals, but also down the line, the pipeline that builds up from that is incredible. So I really hope to touch on that, and you being in this for so long, we're gonna get a pretty good understanding of that as well.
Good, absolutely. Well, I'm flexible, so whatever direction you're going, I'll just roll with it.
Amazing, 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 amazing. All right. Well, we have a couple minutes. Usually we have attendees usually join late anyway, and we have
Okay,
a couple minutes before we start. So give me a second. I'm just going to prepare an
that's fine.
audience.
I'm doing some note stuff.
Amazing, amazing. We'll do a quick tech check from people that we already have in here.
Okay.
From those of you that are here in the chat, if you could just type where you're messaging from, your area, where you're at. As you know, Julia, we're based out of Canada. We are primarily a Canadian company into the
Okay.
U.S. market. Julia, for those of you who don't know, is actually in the U.S. She's not in the Canadian market, but I'm going to assume that most of our viewers are going to be Canadian here.
All right. So we'll call it North America viewership.
There you go. Let's make sure. So from the attendees that are here in the chat, there's the chat button. If you just message where you're messaging from, what area are you in? If you guys can hear us, they should be able to hear us. And
There was an issue with the chat. It was disabled. I've just enabled it. So they sent some answers in the Q&A section.
all right. Well, that would tell them like, why is nobody? All right. So we've enabled the chat here now. And so we've got, hey, Stuart, how are you? Stuart is with us. So we have Mehul from Tampa. Well, wow, the first person to actually message is actually from the States. So that's always awesome. Chicago, Stacy. Wow, we've got two American St. Catharines. There we go, Ontario.
We have one also in the Q&A from Florida. So Martha.
Oh, amazing, amazing. It's always good to have our. We are expanding that as much as possible, and We got Timerick, Florida as well. Martha, that's amazing. All right. Stuart, can you hear us okay? Just to double check on that.
Yes, it's a little quiet, but I can hear you.
No worries. Oh, it's a little quiet. I'm not sure. Maybe it's okay. I think we might be able to be good. Should be good on that.
I think it's workable.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. So as we have people popping in, the way that we're going to structure this webinar today is I'll introduce both Julia and Stuart. We'll get a little bit of a sense from them in terms of how long they've been doing this and what their primary source of business is and how they work work their current business. And then we're going to talk all about rental leads, guys. Today it's going to be to get an in-depth understanding of not just the rental lead side, but what do you really need to do to work these leads? What do you need to do to actually help yourself to get to the point where you're getting an abundance of these leads coming in and then starting to make some money, starting to actually go through the process. And hopefully we can get Julia and Stuart as well to maybe share a little bit about how lucrative it's been for them and also down the line how lucrative it can get. And then we'll open up the room to people and have you guys ask questions and have you guys, ask anything you want to ask from both Julia and Stuart. So let's start with, first myself, Otto. For those of you who don't know who I am, I've been a developer by trade. So I created the first version of Agent Locator from a software perspective. From there, grew it into a company of, we had about 15, 20 people within the first 2 years. We're now at about 100 people in the company. We are across Canada and entered the US market about 2 years ago. We help real estate agents with lead generation, lead conversion. We have a CRM system, fully automated stuff with SMS and everything else. And I don't really do a lot of development now. I'm primarily focused on growing the product itself. So trying to figure out new ways to get people to get us leads and doing all these crazy marketing campaigns, trying to figure out things to really get people into our pipeline so that you guys as agents can do what you need to do. So that's about it for me. Let's start with Julia first. Julia, let's do a quick introduction with you. A little bit about you and what you've done so far in real estate.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me here this morning. My name's Julia. I'm in the Northern Virginia market, so right outside of DC. My actual office is located in Alexandria, so I tend to get quite a few leads and opportunities that cover Virginia, Maryland, and DC, so that tri-state DMV area. I'm specifically licensed in Virginia, so and I'll get to this later as we get further into the rentals, but having the opportunity to really have a solid area to work inside of. This is a pricey area as well. So that does offset some things. And so as I talk further, it'll probably make more sense, but I've been in real estate full time since 2015, obsessive about my business. So this is all I do. It's all I focus on. And I have found the opportunity really to do my dream job. I've wanted to be in real estate since I was 10. So for me, being able to do this has been a gift, and I'm very grateful, which is probably why I work as hard as I do, because I know that a lot of people don't get to do their dream career. So I want to make sure that I'm doing my part to be able to utilize this opportunity. So.
That's amazing. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. And it's always amazing to hear that passion that you have for something that turns into a career and a job, and you can sustain yourself. And it's like not even working. You're coming in, it's not even work, and that's what's amazing about what it is that you do, and that you end up being very grateful, and it's always amazing to have that. So thank you for your passion. Thank you for what you do. And I know your clients are thanking you out of their heart, because when they work with you, they feel that way. So that's very much appreciative. Stuart, let's get a little quick introduction to you. Whereabouts are you and how long you've been in real estate, and you're a little bit about yourself.
Okay. So I'm based in Southeast Florida. I'm in Palm Beach County. So my main focus is the southern portion of Palm Beach County, which would be the three cities, Boynton Beach, Delray Beach, and Boca Raton, where I am. To the immediate south of us is Broward, which I would do. It's just not my marketing focus. In terms of pricing, this is a little bit of a pricey area that most rentals are starting at 2, and I'm often looking in the sort of 4 range and upwards. I enjoy property. I've been an agent for about 3 years, but I've been involved in property for more years than I care to admit. I've been a landlord, both residential and commercial. I've helped defend an adverse possession claim. So I've done quite a lot of property. Before that, I was involved in electronics. We used to make PCBs, populate them and make them into products. And before that, I was involved in corporate finance. So I have quite a diverse background. Technically, I enjoy being in real estate. I feel every property is an opportunity. Sometimes the opportunity is a bit limited. Sometimes it's spectacular, but every property should be an opportunity to some extent.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. That's 100%. And to everybody, every property is individualized to them. And like you said, and we've talked about it before, every individual has their own opportunity and everything else. So that is absolutely amazing. Thank you both so much. What we'll do is I'll go into some of the questions, and before some of the questions, I want to mention something with respect to rental leads. I mean, there's we know when you've got your buyer and your seller end, the commissions are going to be a lot higher, and everybody tends to go towards them. And many agents avoid going towards rental leads. This is one of the reasons we want to talk to these two today, because they have not only just avoided them, actually gone after them and want more rental leads. So I want to start in the first question. We've put together some questions, and one of the first questions that I'll actually ask each of you, and I'll start with Julia first, is right off the bat, why rental leads? So you did mention that they're a bit pricier in your end, but can you give us some more specific, in-depth reason in terms of kind of why rental leads, and what do you like about them?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, rentals is a no-brainer pillar in my business. And the goal isn't really to make millions of dollars from rentals. I mean, you could get there eventually. But it's really about setting a foundation inside of my business. And one thing that I have found is that rentals create inertia. And it's more about, you need inertia in your business day in and day out, week in, week out, month in and month out, in order to create stability. And when you have buyers and sellers kind of in the background, or even if that's your primary focus, because believe it or not, it is for me, but the rental opportunities creates quote unquote something to do each day, but it also keeps you focused on your business. One of the things that I hear a lot from my colleagues is, oh, I have nothing to do, business is slowing down, and you hear all sorts of noise. And one thing that I tend to have found over the years is that I'm always busy because I'm creating opportunities, I'm talking to more people. So rentals itself is a really good way to sharpen your skill set, do more transactions in general, and then give yourself the opportunity to create a pipeline that you can largely control, and also at a very optimal price point. And right now, yes, I'm doing the paid ad option, and that's just for speed and quantity, but in the sense that you can do the entire thing for free. And I'm happy to share some of the methods that I've used over the years, but I would say it's unfortunate for agents to disregard the rental opportunities, partly because some of my best referrals come from my rental clients, and I get buyers and sellers from them. They don't really send me more renter friends, they send me buyers and sellers. And so for less than $4, I've got more opportunities. So
the referrals that come from that, and that's actually one of the questions we're going to lead into. How many buyer seller deals can you expect to get from your rental leads, whether it's directly from the rental lead themselves or whether it's a referral because they feel that you're an amazing agent, and their friends and family should work with you. So I thought this might be a really good kind of thing to share, because you've shared some numbers with us, and You know, when you're talking about when you're not busy and you're really, you know, the pipeline is dried up because the buyers and sellers that you have have maybe
Mhm.
pulled back and the market conditions have changed such that, you know, they're not no longer able to afford. So then you know, obviously at that point you kind of pull back yourself because you're not busy at that point, but rentals keep you consistently busy.
Mhm.
They will keep you consistently busy, not just from the rental perspective, but also from a buyer and seller perspective, because you will get some referrals. But Julia has been amazing enough to share some of her numbers with us as well. So the numbers that we're sharing here, and she's allowed us to share this. So in January, in terms of her rental campaign that she has going,
Yep.
she's generated 101 leads and at a cost of about 293 per lead. So she spent $295 in rentals, got 101 leads. And what she's done incrementally is increased her budget on an ongoing basis. She's currently at about $900 a month on the rental leads. And talk to us a little bit, Julia, about why you decided to increase the rental. So for those of you that don't know the chart, basically the total year to date, she's generated about 870 leads. And she spent $3,069 on generating those 870 leads. But tell us a little bit about the idea of that incremental increase and what you're doing with respect to the leads.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things is when I first started, I actually started working with the company with Agent Locator right around Christmas. Not an ideal to start because I was like
Yeah,
not around, but that was on me. So I really didn't get going until about January once the ads were created, you know, my CRM was set up and I started working through that. But part of the reason why it was actually a better option for me to incrementally increase my budget was I needed to learn a new system. And there's a lot that Agent Locator can do. And so I had to go through that training, but then
sure.
also figuring out how your leads come in, what sort of feedback you're getting, working on building out the drip campaigns, tweaking those, improving them. And so you kind of notice the holes. And by going a little bit slower when you're first ramping up, gave me that ability to see what
I
what
love that.
problems do I keep coming into often, and then plugging them. So now I'm fairly confident with what I've got going on at this point now, you know, towards the end of May.
Yep,
And it's really about just scale and
yep,
understanding, you know, workload and things like that. So it's okay to start with a lower budget, and I would personally recommend it, but
100%.
also have the set goal of continuing to increase your budget as you can afford. So right
Yep.
now my budget's about $30 a day. And I would obviously like to get it higher, but I have been pleased with the results that I've been getting. So, and you'll notice in those numbers, there's been some variations, and that just might be my market, kind of the time of the year.
Sure.
And so it's just one of those things where what I'm seeing, I'm happy with. And I have no complaints about that. And I'm specifically on Facebook, just for people that are wondering.
Amazing. So there's so much that we've mentioned here. I'll unpack it for everybody. And so, well, first and foremost, when you're starting off in any new source of leads that you're getting. So, and I don't mean new like rental leads or buyer leads. It's more like new source of these. This company is the first time I'm generating leads for them. You're always better off starting slower and then gradually increasing as you start to really, like what Julia has done, patch things up to make sure things are being done properly. What that means is, you know, when leads are coming in, that I can get to them fast enough. I've got some automation going. I've got SMSs going to them. I've got emails going to them, getting them to respond back. Because the one thing that you'll understand and you'll realize about these leads and about any leads is that if they're not being properly qualified, you're just wasting your money and time, truly. So it's amazing that Julia has done that and gradually increased, because as she's making some money from this, she reinvests that money back into the actual part. Now, we didn't discuss this, Julia, and I did ask it by email, sharing what you've got so far from this. Is that something you're comfortable with, or you don't want to go into
Yeah,
that at all?
absolutely. That's
Yeah,
not, I don't care.
yeah, amazing. Um, so out of these 870 leads, like here's when we look at a brand new campaign that started just from January, so that's, you know, only really January hasn't been that far away. You know, generally you see referrals coming in afterwards as well. Like after 5-6 months, somebody's known you, they may
Mhm.
refer somebody to you. So the number of deals will increase down the line. But can you share with us so far what you've been able to get like directly out of the actual rental leads?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I typically, my business for the rental sides, is kind of by a rule of 1/3. So for every chunk of leads I make or I generate per month, about 1/3 of them are realistically ready within that first 1 to 3 months, and then 3 to 6 months, and then like kind of that 6 to 12-month range.
Right.
And like that is necessary in your pipeline building anyways. So I wouldn't be discouraged if you're receiving leads and they're like, well, I thought they'd be ready. The answer is no, that's not real life.
Right.
But even from a production standpoint, about 1/3 of those leads in any given month are going to be actually workable.
Right.
For one reason or another. And then it's my job to, obviously I would like a 50%, but at 30% from they don't know me from anywhere, to, hey, Julia, can we go out and look at property? Like those are pretty solid numbers for me. So I'm only talking about my business, but I really can't complain about what I'm seeing. And week to week, on an average day, I'll generate about 5 to 9 leads, and that's just based on my current budget.
Right.
From that, and this is something that I had mentioned in a previous conversation, is that I have a automated form, and we'll get to that in probably later questions, where they're filling that out, and I have probably about a 20% completion rate, and all of it's automated. So 95% of phase 1 is hands off. So yesterday I was showing property all day long. You know, my first appointment was at 8 o'clock in the morning. I got in around 7:15. During that time, I had 5 leads come in. I had 2 forms filled out, and I was doing other things in my business, but I had more opportunities happening in the background. And so if you would like a more hands-off approach in your lead generation, this is a really good system, and it's simple.
love it.
Anybody can set this up, but this is a really good way to create about 30 to 35, just based on my current budget right now in my market. And it might change for other people, about 30 to 35 opportunities that I wouldn't have had had I not considered pursuing this in the manner that I have.
So many nice nuggets inside of that you've mentioned. So automation being one of the things that's key, in automation being, especially with rental leads, and as we're going to discuss it a bit more, you know, because you're not making as much money from a rental lead as you are from a buyer lead, you want to make sure that as much of your thing is automated as possible. So, you know, one of the key things that Julia has done here through our system is that when a lead comes in, there's a form that she has that she wants everybody to fill out before she really goes through the discussion with them and really waste any time with them. And without them filling out that form, basically you're only contacting and communicating with those individuals that fill out that form. Is that correct?
That is correct. To
Love
date, I
it.
have 175 filled out forms, and that was all through the rental campaign, the drip campaign that is set to these ads.
Amazing.
And that's just, yeah, I
Yeah.
can't complain.
That's amazing. Yeah, absolutely amazing. And so the other thing she mentioned is that we're actually doing Facebook ads for her, guys. So she's actually not doing Google yet. We'll most likely end up doing Google for you as well. And you know, once we start a few other things, but that's on Facebook. So far, you know, what we've learned from Julia, and we're going to switch over to Stuart because we dug into other questions because you're providing so many great nuggets. Let's go with Stuart. So Stuart, if we can get you, I'm gonna actually, I think you're muted because there was a little bit of background sound, but there you go, you're unmuted now. Let's go with that base question in terms of why rental leads. So and then we'll go. So why did you choose to work with rental leads? So what was kind of the concept that you have in your mind?
Okay, let me give you a couple of answers. First, in my area, there is quite a lot of adult community, and those are fairly low value. And in fact, the rental commissions can be right around the commissions for a sale in that case. Next, the buyers, what I would call retail buyers, are fickle, whereas renters have a much more narrowly defined requirement. So a retail buyer may be thinking, I'd love to do this, And then over the months that you're educating them, it changes and changes and changes. It may or may not materialize. With a tenant, they usually have a date. In fact, my qualification for a tenant is, when do you hope to move? I need to know what the timeline is. That's critical to the whole program. But the important thing is, a tenant usually has a fairly rigid timeline, and it's weeks and months, not many months and even years.
Mhm.
So I like that's why I like the rental people, that it's so well defined. Also, the buyers, you can spend a lot of time on them over a long period, and it may or may not materialize. And your hourly rate, you'll find, actually will be comparable to what you would have done had you been doing rentals. So I quite like the rental people, and it's specific. And I also find it's easier to engage them because they know what they need. And the ones who engage, I will run with. The ones who don't very quickly go to archive. And I'm afraid that's, Julia mentioned a third. I think that's roughly right. I would say my experience is broadly similar, that within your leads, you're going to have 1/3 that are the goers, 1/3 that have a timeline that really pushes them out from immediate consideration, but they still may be active, and about 1/3 who, for whatever reason, just aren't real or are totally unrealistic.
Amazing. That's it seems to be whatever state you're in or whatever province that you're in, it's kind of the same. Because I asked actually a few. We have I mean, we have a number of clients in our region that are rental leads. They unfortunately weren't able to make it to the webinar, but it's kind of similar numbers as well. And some of these guys that are making $20, $30, $40,000 a month just off of rental leads alone. They've kind of, as much as they can, automated the system as much as they possibly can. So one of the things that I know some of these guys do fairly well is they have forms as well that are to be filled out. And if people aren't filling them out, they just have another follow-up process in place to try to get them to fill out that form. So it's like they don't attempt only once, they'll attempt getting them to fill out that form a few times. And they squeeze a bit more out of those people as well. And then have some sort of automated ways. But we're going to leap into that next question, which is the number one concern for everybody that's working with internet leads. I'm gonna mute you, Stuart, for a second, because I think there's a little bit of a background noise to your mic that ends up coming through. So whenever you speak, we'll just get you to unmute yourself if you can. Amazing, thank you. So the first question, and we had a question by Martha here, ask if you could share the form, Julia, if at all possible.
Absolutely.
But that's also gonna, yeah, thank you so much. We'll pass it. We'll actually email it to everybody who's part of the webinar so that we can share that later. But one of the core things with rental leads, the core things is time wasters. How do we get away with not wasting our time with those time wasters, because we know there's not much money to be made in it? So we want to talk about, specifically the core things. And I know, Julia, for you, it's the form as well. But is there anything else that you do to detect and figure out, hey, who's your really time waster? Like, what are the core things that you require of an individual before you'll go sit down and waste your time and actually sit down in the car and show them properties?
Yeah,
Let's start
absolutely.
with you. Yeah.
So one of the big things for me is I look at renters the same way. I look at renters and I treat renters the same way as I treat my buyers and sellers. So everybody gets the same level of service. It's my job to determine what level of effort I need to put in the moment. And one of the things that is helpful is that unless, and you just touched on it, is that in all of my drip campaigns, especially for the first month and a half, every communication says, if you would like some help or you'd like to create a custom cart, please fill out this form. I have people call me, they try and get around it, and they'll call me directly, and I'm like, hey, I'm happy to talk with them, be a friendly person, but I will also require that they fill out the form at the end. And the reason is I need that information, but it's also a way of setting the correct framework of one of the things that is very common of why I think realtors don't value the power of rentals is because they don't have a system in place that creates efficiency. And so it's chaotic and all over the place because they're chaotic and all over the place. And the leads that they attract are chaotic and all over the place. So one of the first things you absolutely have to do to eliminate time wasters is you, as the leader in your business and your life, is establish a system to work inside of. You need the framework. And part of a good system is good leadership. And so when I make them fill out this form, whether they've talked to me on the phone and told me everything they want to get, or they DM me, or whatever it is that they're trying to do, part of that first step of me working with them is creating, hey, I'm the leader, fall in line. This is what I need you to do. And it's a gentle invitation. There's no forcing. So I really don't want to work with somebody that can't follow directions. And so because I need that, because in order to deal with volume, you need to have a way of filtering out the noise. And so that is one of the first steps that you can do for yourself, is it doesn't have to be a form, but it needs to be something that is repeatable, that you don't have to think about. I've had, yesterday I had somebody call me and we were chatting, and she literally told me everything she needed. I knew that when I got home, the form would be sent out to her because it's all automated. But if I ever had to, I could just jot down the answers even from earlier in the morning, because I know what I was asking, because it's the same thing in the form. And so part of that, eliminating the time wasters, is that you have to set the framework which you want them to work inside of. And like some people, like they don't want to fill it out or they don't want to answer your questions. How are you supposed to help them if they don't even give you what you need? And so that's the first part, is to really make sure that you have a way of doing a quality control. And that's really what the form does for me.
Okay. And is there a specific type of motivation for a rental that you prefer to work with, as opposed to others that may, you may say, hey, I'm really, the chance of them moving is going to be much lower. And I mean, I'll give you a few examples of discussions that I've had with previous agents and things that they've said. Somebody who's been in an apartment, been living there for years, and they're like, hey, they're sick of living there, they want to move, but they're really not committed. They're still in a month-to-month. They really have no urgency to move in any way, shape, or form. But they're looking for that magnificent, amazing new place they're going to fall in love with. And the agent has shown them 50 properties, and they're like, hey, I'm not. Is there a cutoff line? Is there something that you would say, hey, I'm gonna be willing to work with you or not willing to work with you, and then you, for your own sake and your own time, that you're kind of not working with certain individuals?
Yeah, so I have more of a, because once they filled out the form, I can create their cart, and I'm monitoring their activity and whatnot. But it is one of the things that I've gotten very good at, is being able to ask really good questions and drilling down into their, I guess it's like that Ford method. Like, what are their actual emotional triggers? Because that's going to determine how quickly they're going to be making a decision or not.
Right.
One thing I would say, and this is something that I've learned, is that some of the leads are, I need to move in next week. As a realtor, you have a understanding that that's probably unlikely. And sometimes when they're coming through, not always, is that you're their backup option in case whatever they've got going on doesn't work out and they're panicking. And I don't want to be pulled into somebody's panic. Like, if you know you need to move, you'll appropriately pace yourself, or at least to the best of your ability. So I tend to not put too much time into, I need to move in 2 weeks. Now, there are emergency situations and you really need to factor that in, but their level of engagement with you largely determines your level of engagement with them. Now, I still follow up with my leads. I still reach out. I still do my tagging and the filtering that way in the Agent Locator platform. But it's one of those things where, and I found this to be more so with, I have a lot of out-of-state and out-of-country clients as well. But I find this to be more with military clients, is they are going to be out of state. And sometimes they want you to see every property under the sun that comes through. And so you really need to be able to say, I'll do a first round with you. And that's maybe 3 or 4 properties. Somebody will send me a list of 12 and I'll say, can you, instead of, you really need to cut this down to your top 3. And it forces them to do more work. They just will see whatever. And so you're really trying to understand what it is that is preventing them from making a final decision. And sometimes it could be they have some qualification issues. And so that's not on you. Other times they really are not good decision makers. But as part of that leadership quality that you should have inside of your business, you should be able to filter out a lot of like sometimes it's a fear-based thing, sometimes it's like they really don't know. And so when we're not having success, first I always go back to myself and say, maybe I'm not answering the right question. I don't assume
Right.
it's one. And so I go back and I ask more specific questions. I'm very laid back in general, but I might go more into a forward-facing, not aggressive, but like, I have some questions I need you to answer. You're going to answer them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then that helps as well.
Okay.
But I've
Amazing.
also gone back to people and said, you know, right now I don't think you're ready. And it's okay to be honest with them. Actually, I encourage it, is to be direct with them, because most people are not direct. But when you are direct and you're forward, people will fall behind that. And so it makes it easier for them to say, you know, actually, you're probably right. I should probably wait a couple of weeks, or they're too early or some situation. So it's okay to be out in front saying, this is what I need from you. If you're not ready yet, that's okay.
Right.
You know what I'm going to be doing, so I'm ready when you are. So I say that a lot. And a lot of times that helps. And so it moves some time wasters off my plate for a little bit until they're ready and they come back and they're like, okay, we had some time to think about this. You were just earlier in the process when you needed
Right.
to be involved.
Okay. Makes sense. It makes all sense in the world. So that's definitely Stuart, if you could unmute yourself, and do you have any additional nuggets? Kind of what is it that you may do as well to help alleviate some of those time wasters?
Okay, first of all, Julia is refreshingly clear and succinct, partly because I'm doing rentals, it registers. Sounds almost like music to my ears.
Good.
Now, first of all, on the time wasters, one expression I hear often is, I know exactly what I want, which to me sounds like their expectations are unrealistic. Next, people think if they look and they look and they look, somewhere someone's hidden in the MLS the property that is right for them, or has the features that they think they're going to get at the price they have. And very often I have to tell people, everything you want is available at double your budget. And somehow you've got to, as Julia says, you have to take the lead sometimes, as these people are looking for guidance. We're supposed to be the professionals who know this business. It's our obligation to show and explain and to tell them.
Right.
Next, on the viewings, I'm boiling it down to saying we do 4 to 6 viewings. And after that, what we're going to see is probably going to be shades of what we have already seen. And next, if you want to run me around and use my time, one of the minimum protections that I have to ask for, and I'm not good at this, I admit, but I need to get them to agree a kind of exclusive, which is commonly done with purchases, where they kind of say, I'm going to work with you exclusively. I'm not going to make you spend hours and hours on me and then
Right.
just do the deal with the next agent that happens to call me.
Okay.
So those would be my supplemental comments to Julia's admirable assessment.
Amazing. Very well said on your part as well. I appreciate that, Stuart. The Balwinder actually commented saying qualifying them in beginning also saves time 100%. So the qualification questions that you ask and you get them to fill out is really, one of the core ways to qualify and eliminate time wasting people, because obviously those won't even respond and won't fill that out. So definitely. So we've kind of touched on this, which was money, like how much I can expect to make from a rental leads perspective. But if we put it onto, let's say, a cost per deal perspective. So, if you look at how much money you spend on the marketing in comparison to how much you make, is there a number that you could put, for example, Julie, if I share this sheet again real quick, what you expect to have that as a cost per deal perspective. So for example, if you spend $295, got 101 of those leads, like how many would you say you would close from those 101 leads that you got?
Some of this might be a skill set based, but I would say if I had about 100 leads, I could comfortably close anywhere from like 9 to about 15.
Okay.
That's if I'm pushing and I'm really working it.
Yeah.
And
So
just
if we go
yep, absolutely. Just because they came in January doesn't mean that they're actually closing in January. So they might
Sure.
be, in all reality, they're probably like in April, May.
Yeah.
But I'm still working on a system of tracking, like, it's easier now because I have their actual profile inside of
Right.
Agent Locator, so I can see when the initial point of action was, and just trying to come up with a graph and say, okay, this is what it looks like. But for me, it's not so much, I try and set completed closed transaction goals for myself month to month. And minimum, I want to close at least 5. For me in my market, my average commission is about $650. So it's not one of those outsized half month's rent, full
Right.
month's rent, unfortunately. So I do need to do more volume, but I also never want to overload my other pillars in my business. So for rentals, they work in parallel. So
Right.
some months I might do more, sometimes I might do less. It really just depends on, what I'm focused on for the month.
Yeah.
But month to month, it's always rentals all the time. But I would say for me, unfortunately, I don't have a direct correlation of if I do 100, I'm for sure going to be closing out 7, 10, 9, whatever. It really comes down
Makes
to
sense.
what's their timeline, and
Yeah.
does it look like the total volume?
And
Yeah.
yeah, and as you progress using our system, you'll have more stats and you'll have a bit more to share with, because we have in our platform, like, you have the date of when the lead came in, the
Mhm.
date of when you got in contact with them, the date when you went to a showing, the date when you sold them. So you can actually say, hey, give me an average of how long it takes for me to go from point A, which is a new lead, to the point of sale, which is a sold. So what's that length of time? And then how many have I actually done in a time period? So, but on an average, on your perspective, it's about, let's say, a 9% conversion rate from a rental lead to an actual sale,
Mhm.
which if we look at it, let's say from a cost perspective, just to give some of those a number, $295 divided by 9, $32 a cost per lead for Julia. Stuart, on your end, what would you say the conversion rate out of 100 would you say would be?
I would echo Julia's numbers. I was giving this some thought, and I felt 9 to 15 is a sensible range. It's going to be horribly inconsistent, but that's a sensible range.
Yeah.
In terms of cost, so my costs seem to be a little higher. That I'm running around $4 per for the raw lead, which would work out to be a 25 to 30 at around the 15% cost per transaction.
Right. Okay. Amazing. Thank you both for sharing that. That's definitely good information to have for all those that are considering the rental leads. On the Canadian side, I can share with you that we've got, I mean, I've seen agents that are converting at, let's say, 3, 4, 5%, and then I've seen agents that are actually converting at 19, 20% of the leads coming in. Unbelievable difference in terms of qualification, in terms of what they do to approach the leads, in terms of how they work the leads. They've got a team behind a lot of these, which is, just to go out and help and show properties and get people through. So it's certainly possible to get the higher percentages as well. And maybe that could be a market thing as well. It could be an individualized, perspective on certain things as well. But the lower end, if I look at the majority of the agents, the average is actually somewhere where you guys are at as well, from that 9, and a little bit above from there. So, the third, yeah, please.
Julia also mentioned a typical value per transaction. That I generally am looking for around 1,000 as a minimum level. And in my area, it would be up to about 3,000 on a larger transaction. There are some below that, which I'm afraid I tend to try and avoid. Or in one case recently, I warned them that my firm would charge an extra couple of $100 on top because it was just ridiculously low. The lower fees normally come from what I would call corporate managers. There are a number of corporations which own rental property portfolios in our area, and they're particularly mean on giving independent agents commission.
Yeah, definitely. And it's, when you have to hard fight for your commission, it becomes even harder to that perspective. And Julia is in one of those markets where it's actually a little bit harder, but it shows that it's very much still possible to really make it work and make it worth your time.
Mhm.
So the next question was in terms of how many showings on average. So if you were to average it out in terms of all the people you've showed properties to, what would be the average number of showings you do show properties before you get, a rental agreement to be signed?
For me personally, usually it's a little bit different because I have different forms of leads. I have direct leads that sometimes my broker sends me, and
Sure.
they've identified a specific property. So we're usually going to see that. And then from there, we open up the cart and for further things. But from this method of a cold lead through a cart to showing property, sometimes it's one and you're done, which is fantastic. Other times they're like, hey, can you just send me the application information? And I just sat on my computer and I get paid down the road. But other times, about twice maybe is the most I typically do. Sometimes the first round out is really for me to get feedback from them viewing
Okay.
property so that I can go in and refine their cart and then also suggest some properties because I value my time more than anything. And so I don't want to waste my time. Usually 3 is like kind of the outlier of 3 different appointments, but we're not going one property. I'll usually group in 3 or 4 and we knock them all out. And that's what we're doing for that. But a lot of times they're ready. And part of that is the back end work that's happening where by the time they're going to see property, I'm fairly confident we're going to find them something that they
Right.
could apply for, get approved for, and then I'm going to get paid whenever that check comes in. So I wouldn't say you should, if you're at 4 or more showings, then there's something that isn't, there's still some questions that haven't been answered. And then
Okay.
you have to go back in and refine that. But
Right.
if you have to go out more than 4 times, then either they're not ready or you haven't finished your end of the bargain here and asked better questions.
Makes sense. Okay. So for those of you considering that on Julia's side, about 4 showings is kind of the max that you want to go aim for, and to really significantly lower the number of showings you do, ask as many questions as you can. Stuart, what would you say your average based on the leads that have been coming in? What would you say your average number of showings have been?
I would say 4 to 6 and 1 to 2 trips. If they want more than that, particularly more than 2 trips, I have to think very carefully, is this a good use of my time? Because I just don't think they're going to see anything particularly different, that once you've seen a representative selection. I try to show them the proposed tour ahead of time to make sure that this is something that, at least from the pictures and the description, they like, and it's within their criteria. That I've had the experience where we've got to the door and they've looked at it and said, well, this is not for us. And that just wastes everybody's time. I try and make people look at least 2 properties, but when they say, oh, I want this one, I try to get a second one in, really, so they have contrast. And also, if you've only got 1 horse running and anything happens, you're dead in the water. If you've at least got 2 or 3 places they've seen, then you've got something to go on. And as Julia was saying, the information, understanding what they need, getting them to tell you, that's all part of the mix. So I don't like doing an outing to look at 1 place.
Okay. Yeah.
One of the other things I could mention as well is the properties I'm showing them, they've selected. So I'm not selecting it for them. They've indicated to me, and just based on the progress, is that we're seeing what they've asked for. So
Right.
if it doesn't work out, sometimes they don't know because obviously they're not realtors, so they're not in and out of properties, but they can't be disappointed that it's like, oh, I didn't realize. It's because they've self-selected. So they tend to be a lot more conscious of their time as well. So that does help. Is I would try a less of a, here, we're going to go see these properties because I picked them for you. Now, if you see one where you know it would be a good fit, go ahead and add that in. And sometimes that's the one they actually want in the end, because they're like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. But I would largely leave it to them to tell you what they want to see. And then I schedule my showings into my schedule based on what works for me. I
Right.
ask them, what's your availability? But my entire business is structured around, when does this work for Julia? And then largely they will be, there's some flexibility in there. But I rarely do showings on the weekends. I never work Sundays, and I'm usually done by noon on Saturday if I work a Saturday that month.
Oh, that's amazing. That's really refreshing to hear, and amazing saving of your time to make sure that you're protecting yourself. The few other questions that we have are related to some of those qualifying questions that I know there's actually an anonymous attendee asked a question as well. But before we get to that question, and For those of you that are listening in, after the next couple of questions, we are going to actually get into the questions that you guys have. So if you guys have questions that you want to ask, go ahead and use that Q&A, and we'll actually go through each question and answer each question through that as well. So if I haven't touched on something, just make sure you just ask that question in Q&A or even in chat. I'm sure we'll pull it up. But what are some of those qualifying questions that you're asking? So I know, Julia, you're going to share your form, which is very amazing, and we're going to send that off to everybody. But what are some of those things inside of that form? Like, can you share a little bit with us in terms of what those questions look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a second screen, so I apologize. I'm going to pull it over here for a second. So some of the questions I ask, and I'll just run through them real quick. I haven't until the total count, so somebody in the audience is checking, but I want their first and last name. I need their best email. I want their best phone number. I ask them, do you need to rent, buy, or sell? I ask them when they're looking to move. So ASAP, 1 to 3 months, 3 to 6 months, 6 to 12 months. What is your desired move-in date? Some of these questions are mandatory. They can't submit their form unless they filled them out. So
Perfect.
As we're going through, I ask them what type of property do they like: condo, apartment, townhouse, detached, or open to a few options. How many bedrooms do you need? How many bathrooms do you need? What are your desired cities or counties, at least for Northern Virginia? We go by counties, but adjust it to wherever you are. And then that's just, they can fill that in. What is your max monthly budget? Do you have any pets? Yes, no, ESA with paperwork, other. Obviously, what kind of pet do you have? I want to know age, how many, breed, gender, anything like that, weight.
Size, yep.
How many occupants are going to be living with you? How many parking spaces do you need? What is your annual income? And it's broken into anywhere from less than 25,000 all the way up to 250,000. And they can just toggle in there. And some of this is more of like a game in the form. So they want to finish it because this is exciting for them, believe it or not. I ask what your credit score is, and that's from I don't have one to poor, all the way from fair, good, very good, exceptional. Do you have any broken leases? If they answered yes, I want to know how long, if there's a balance. Do you have any evictions? Yes or no. If there was an eviction, when was it? Do you have any bankruptcies? Yes or no. When was that? Do you have any felonies or misdemeanors? I don't want to know what it is. I need to know if there is one, because that does impact whether or not, at least here in Virginia, they can get approved for places and if I can help them. Do you have a housing voucher? Yes or no. If you do, what county is it for? Are you looking for apartments that will accept corporate business, which is the Airbnb? I want to know this, partly because I don't want to be somebody else's project.
Yeah, Airbnb looker, yeah.
So I put that in there. And then the last question is, please add anything else you'd like to share, etc., about your new home. And then I just have a disclosure of I'm a realtor, fair housing opportunity, the next steps once they finish their criteria list, and then my contact information. So it's very quick to get through. It takes about 1.5 minutes, more than anything. And then once that's done, that form gets sent to a Google sheet, so I can always pull it up, but also in the Google Forms itself, I have it right there. Yep. And the ones that have clicked buy, sell, I'll send that off to my lender, and he has the form to look through and then reach out to them. So it's a time efficiency factor, but these are some of the things that I want to know. And of course, this is just, you can put anything you want in your Google form. Yep. I have found, and I've tweaked this multiple times, for me to get started where I have enough to get what I need without, I'm not asking for their social, that sort of thing. You can gain a lot of insight into somebody just based on these questions. And if you have something more specific you want to know, I would caution you as you're creating your form, get what you need, but don't go overboard, because at that point they're still getting to trust you. So you don't want to be that much up into their business, but you do want to be able to effectively work with them. And as you get to know them and communicate, they'll tell you. So then you just take better notes and then update their profile in your CRM as you go. So.
Yeah, so what's interesting here in Julia's part, this is the form, guys, that actually goes out as soon as a lead registers. So when they come in, an email goes off and maybe even an SMS message asking them to fill out that form. So if you take a step back for a second and think about what's happened so far with this lead, like the first time is the lead seeing an ad on Facebook about rental properties. They're filling out that form. and giving their information about, the properties maybe they may be interested in, they're getting an email from Julia. Now, they don't know who Julia is. They don't know anything about Julia yet. That's where you have to be a little bit cognizant of what kind of questions you're going to ask, like Julia said, because you can't go dive deep into asking them for the world, because the first, they don't even know who they're sharing information with yet, to a degree, because they don't know who Julia is. They haven't spoken to her yet, most likely. So they may be a little bit hesitant to actually fill out that form to a degree. So that's just, one of those things that you don't want to ask for too much. And as Julia said, as they fill out that form, that becomes the first step for them to give a bit more information, and then for Julia to actually give a bit more of herself to their need, and help them understand what's available in their for what they're based on looking for. Stuart, would you add any other questions into what Julia has said there?
I really would just sort of emphasize that in my market, the problems I've had, an awful lot of associations here that have a plethora of rules, and associations have sabotaged my transactions a number of times, not knowingly. It's just things that weren't thought about. Like one man, everything was fine, and then they said, "Oh, you have a truck, we don't allow trucks." Many places don't allow livery vehicles, but this particular one just said no trucks of any kind, and that blew that one out of the water. And the other thing that I try and ask really early is the pet issue. That I don't know if it's a Florida thing, but an awful lot of people have pets. And I try and explain that your selection of properties will be inversely proportional to the number and weight of your pets.
Mm-hmm.
One lady, every time I spoke to her, she revealed more pets. And in the end, I was tempted to say, "Madam, what you need to do is find accommodation in a zoo."
Oh, that's a good one. Well,
Yes,
yeah,
once you got into the reptiles, that was the end of the discussion. I really.
yeah. All right, so I've got one more question that I want to ask before we get into some of the questions that we've been asked on the chat and others, and that's money down the road. So both of you have been in this game for long enough, getting rental leads, being in real estate. If you were to try to sum down, out of 100 leads, how many people would actually end up preferring somebody to you, or how many end up buying down the road? So you can put those together, whether it's that lead refers somebody to you that ends up buying or selling a property, or they themselves actually end up buying or selling a property, or they referred you to somebody who they referred you to end up buying a property. Is it 0.5% out of 100? Is it 1%? Would you be able to round it up? And that's obviously, it's not going to happen where in January you get a lead and that lead refers you to a buyer in February. I'm talking over the next 4, 5, 6 years of you knowing that individual. Would you be able to sum up some kind of number to say, out of 100, would it be one person that is referring to somebody? Would it be half of one? What would you say for you, Julia, would be based on that?
Right now, my average is for every 10 renters I work with, it will generate a buyer the next year. And
Okay.
that's pretty consistent. Now, that doesn't mean that that's just a buyer.
Makes sense.
It
Yeah.
doesn't mean they necessarily will do something. There's a very high percentage that does, but that 10-to-1 ratio is a really good motivator for me, because each year I always come in with a solid base of buyer leads that I've worked with or are going to be referred to. And I have a lot of their information already. They like the flow and process in which they interact with me the first time. So it's a no-brainer that they're coming back to me and saying, "Hey, Julie, we're ready to buy." And a lot of
Yeah.
times, unfortunately, I'm not as good with the follow-up, like down the road, and that's something I'm continually working on. But because I offer quality service with a process in place, which they like, it creates safety. They come back, they're like, "We want more of this." And
Right.
so it becomes very easy to generate future business. But your ratios might be, mine's 10-to-1. I think if I was a lot more aggressive in the manner, it could be better, but
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with that. And that's fine with me, but that's typically
Yeah.
what I'm seeing.
That's a great
But I
number.
do get more buyer opportunities coming from my renters in terms of referrals, believe it or not.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So for Julia, out of 100 leads, essentially that ends up being about just under 1%, because if she does, let's say 9 deals, if she closes at 9%, that's out of 100 leads, that's 9 deals in the rental side. And then out of every 10 of her deals that she does in rental ends up getting a referral for a buyer. So that's kind of a number there. Stuart, what would you say on your end would be for, down the road referrals?
I don't have Julia's sort of history to give you solid empirical information, but I would agree with the 10%. I think that's about right. I try and introduce the buying question as early as possible. I quote the economist for the National Association of Realtors, who did some research, and he says that tenants tend to have a net worth in the tens of thousands, and owners tend to have net worth in the hundreds of thousands. Now, the reason why I think we only are going to see about 10% convert is somehow the mindset of tenants is not always easy to bring round to the discipline of ownership. In Florida, there is assistance for first-time buyers, and I would encourage anybody to see if that's available in their state. In Florida, it's typically a $10,000 contribution by the state on preferential terms towards the deposit. And that's one of the issues that holds back tenants, is they seem to have a problem saving. And of course, their rental has no tax benefit. So they're they're handicapped from the outset with that. So yes, I would be looking for about 10%. So that means that your portfolio of rental customers and even rental leads are a great source to be prospecting for buyers.
Awesome. All right. That is amazing. And let's actually get into some of the questions that we've had from participants. So there was one in the Q&A for, so Julia, do you ask their documents first before going on showings, or at least a credit score? So we know that there is a credit score question in there, but do you maybe ask them for any other additional documentation before you go show properties to them? Do you ask for a copy of their license card before you meet with them or anything like that? Is there any kind of, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually don't. So the way I communicate typically gets results. So I don't ask for any of that. I don't feel like I need it. And sometimes they send it to me, but it's not a requirement for me. And I think it's because I have a volume mindset where you're still an individual, but if it doesn't work out, like I'm not losing sleep over it. And so this is a nominal cost for reinvesting into my business. And so I don't personally, at least for me in my market and how I operate, I don't necessarily need to confirm what they're telling me is true, because I found that the forum does a lot of that anyways. And the thing is if they're not telling me the truth, one, I feel like I have a pretty good ability to sniff out misalignment with answers pretty quickly. But also, if they're not telling me the truth, it becomes evident very fast. And then I adjust my approach as well. So I don't feel it is necessary to get that information. Now, when they're filling out an application, still in this market, even now, not everything is online. And so there are times they're sending me their documents directly. And they know that I'm licensed, and like we have confidentiality requirements as well. So they're comfortable with providing that information. They'll send me their social, their applications, that sort of thing, because they know that I tell them I absolutely have to protect your information. So they're like, oh yeah, totally fine. So for me, it's not as necessary.
Okay. Amazing. Stuart, do you, by any chance, in your end in Florida, is it any different? Do you request that they send you a copy of their license, or I mean, I know you touched on the BRA part, which is the buyer representative, or let's say this rental representative agreement. You do it with some individuals, but would you say you don't do it with all of them, or do you ask all of them to send you a copy of their license before you show them properties?
No, unlike Julia, initially, I'm going to tend to take them on trust. The first thing I will want to introduce them to is the background report and the eviction report. As in Florida, in our area, quite a high proportion of landlords want to see that. And it's almost at a point where some of them, they want to see those reports before they will even consider the offer. Because from the landlord standpoint, if you have a history of evictions or you have some hellacious violent record, then probably it doesn't really matter how much rental you're offering. You're not going to get in. And also, they usually have a feel for what the association will and won't accept. So they're looking both as the landlord and what is going to get through association approval, which is a big thing.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. For those of you asking, I know there's a question on there. We've answered it. So we will share the form that Julia has put together, and we'll make sure it gets emailed to all of you that have registered for the webinar as well. I believe we've gone through all the questions. We've gone through all the stuff. I want to take a minute to really thank both of you for sharing your insights, sharing your knowledge with us. It's very refreshing to see that you guys are willing to share and willing to come on and give back to the agents and then others as well to help them understand. So Julia, just again, in the event that anybody has a referral for you where people are moving, which market are you in again, just so that we can share that here with the staff, with everybody.
I'm in the Northern Virginia market, so right up in Alexandria, Virginia, right outside of DC. This covers the counties around here, covers quite a bit distance. So if there's anything I can ever do for any of your clients down this way, and you'd like me to work with them, send them my information.
Amazing. Thank you very much. And for those of you, actually, if we could just in the message put Julia's information there as well. And Stuart, you are in, again, which market are you in? And we'll actually get our staff to put your information there as well.
Okay, so I would be primarily Palm Beach County and the north part of Broward County. So there's Miami-Dade to the south, then Broward, then Palm Beach. And then it becomes a little more rural as you go north from that. Yep.
Amazing. You're in the sunny state, and we all want to live there. But we know a lot of Canadians are going down there whenever they can, and I know a lot of them winter time they go down in Florida as well. So amazing. Well, we're gonna end it at that. Again, thank you both so much from the bottom of our hearts. We really appreciate you guys sharing information. And we're gonna wait actually just for our staff to give. We have Julia's information in there. We'll get Stuart's information posted in there too. Just so that we can share both of them. Sorry to throw this on you guys, like at the very end of the whole thing. There's Stuart's info as well. Yeah, that's about it. Did you guys have anything else that you want to add, or you want to maybe share with everybody before we drop off?
There's one thing I do want to share. This isn't specific to the agent locator, but this is just more about rentals. And the fact that I'm sure, at least in my market, I've noticed a shift. And this creates kind of a protection against the bubble that you're probably, or the strain you're starting to feel, that you may want to reevaluate what rentals can do in your business. But then also there's 3 things that you really need to master in order to make this effective. And that is marketing, your CRM, and your schedule, because it is easy to work rentals just because of the turnover pace. If you have those 3 things dialed down. And I did mention, I did want to actually touch on this, is that right now, I guess I'm doing paid ads, and that's just because speed and efficiency is something that I prefer. But you can also generate leads on Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, and then some of those other like real estate related boards. And it really isn't that much more work, but you do need some other like tools in order to make that work. And if you don't have a budget for ad spend, you can still do quite well with rentals on a free platform and status. But then also I would encourage you to reach out to your broker, if you're part of one, I should say, and let them know that you're willing to do rentals. And I actually, even for my own business, week to week, I'll get probably about 5 to 7 rental opportunities that are sent my way, because my historical record of working rental leads and closing them is quite high. And so the broker always wants to make sure we're making money. I want to make sure I'm making money as well. So start letting people know that it's okay to send them your rental opportunities. And then it's your job just to do the processing and the filtering of that to make sure that it closes out to the best of your ability. And some things don't work. And a lot of times you might start working with somebody and they find their own thing. And that's just part of the business. Like there's an attrition rate that we have to factor in. But I would tell people my business really didn't, in terms of rentals, didn't really start to get better until I committed to and said, I'm a rental expert. And now I tell everybody. And so that's part of that ownership of this is what I do. I want people to know about it. And like your peers don't care. So it doesn't matter what you're doing because they're worried about themselves. But in terms of how the marketplace sees you and reacts to you, you will do a lot better if you're saying this is what I do and this is what I focus on. They're not going to automatically assume you don't buy and sell. They are going to assume that you're a professional and they want to work with you. And that's really what you want. So I would go back to your mindset and belief system on what it is that you have such a negative aversion to about rentals and start working on that, because it will unlock a large source of income if it's something that you are willing to figure out what to do. And like we can give you the back end process of how to simplify it. You still have to do the work, but we can also show you that you can make quite a bit of money, or at least consistent money, if you incorporate rentals into your business.
Very well said. Thank you very much for that. That's amazing for all of you that, you know, whether you've done it before and you failed, or where you said, hey, there's no money to be made in this, you know, it's one of those psychological things where, you know, depending on where you are from that perspective, where your mind is on that perspective, if you say, well, if I work renters, you know, none of my buyers are going to want to work with me because I'm only working rentals. It's not true in any way. You're only helping those individuals that are actually having that need. And when you look at it from that perspective yourself as well, you start to really hone in on that and use that to really not only make a lot of money for yourself, but also make a lot of people happy that would also send you referrals down the road because they absolutely love working with you and what you're about and how much you've helped them. So that is amazing. That is amazing. Thank you both so much. Really incredible of what you've shared with us today. And we look forward to maybe getting an update in about a year or so to see where you guys are at.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
All right. Thank you all so
Very
much
good.
for being. Thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Julia.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.